Welcome to From Stuck to Scaled, Growth Strategies for Small and Mid-Sized Businesses, your guide to navigating growth, transformation, and success in today's ever-changing business landscape. Each week, we'll dive into proven strategies, real-world case studies, and actionable insights designed to help small and mid-sized business owners scale smart, lead stronger, and grow faster. Let's get you unstuck and on the path to sustainable, scalable success. Now your host, Julio Gonzalez.
Welcome back to From Stuck to Scaled. I'm your host, Julio Gonzalez. Trust isn't just a buzzword. It's the foundation that determines whether leaders inspire or divide, whether teams thrive or stall, and whether businesses grow or collapse. I've been writing a lot about trust lately, and today we're talking about trust as a measurable business asset, one that can accelerate results, deepen engagement, and transform culture. Maggie Ishak is a certified business and executive coach, Trust Edge partner, navigational conversations facilitator, and DISC practitioner. She spent 28 years at Michelin North America, rising from engineering roles to VP of operations and supply chain before launching her coaching practice. Today, she helps leadership teams improve performance, engagement, and alignment while guiding leaders to grow their businesses without sacrificing balance. So let's welcome Maggie to the show. Hey, Maggie, how's it going?
I'm good. How are you, Julio?
I am wonderful. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your business?
Sure. So my name is Maggie Ishak. I am currently a business coach, but I'll call myself a 28-year corporate refugee turned business coach. So leveraging my experience in manufacturing, supply chain, and operations, and managing teams to really bring that to working with business owners, founders, leaders, and their teams to help them. I'm going to play off words here of your podcast is get them unstuck. So help them get from point A to point B in the best, easiest way possible in the least amount of time with the least amount of stress.
So Maggie, I mentioned in the intro that I've been writing a lot about trust lately. So why do you consider, trust to be that ultimate game changer for leaders in business?
That's a great question. A lot of people call trust a soft skill. I think it's a business indicator of success. There's data that shows in high trust environments, morale goes up, engagement goes up, innovation goes up, retention goes up, and the bottom line results actually go up. And the flip is also true. And there's data to also support this. When trust erodes, you don't attract and retain your best employees. It takes longer to get things done. Decisions take a long time. You second guess yourself. Costs go up. And in the end, profits go down. So you could call it a soft skill or you could call it a business skill, but it really has an impact on business results. That's just the bottom line.
And I guess let's get down to the basics. How do you define trust?
So textbook definition would be a confident belief in a person, product, or organization that they're going to do what they say they're going to do. Now that's very textbooky, and you say, all right, what does that mean? Okay. One of the frameworks that I use actually comes from the Trust Edge Leadership Institute. And there's several books written by David Horsager on this, and there's an 8-pillar framework on trust. And it really kind of helps put some meat around the bones and give it some tangible things that you can hang on to. I'm going to list a couple of them right now, but as we go through the course of the conversation, we can talk about the rest of them. So for example, one of them is clarity. So just being really clear. People trust what's clear, mistrust what's ambiguous. Character, doing what's right over what's easy. Even something like competency or contribution. I remember back in my corporate days, if there was somebody that was a real solid contributor to the team, the trust just went up. I mean, you just knew they were going to get things done and that you knew you could trust them in other areas. So those are maybe just a couple of ways that I put some definitions around this word trust.
One of the things that I've always said from an individual trust perspective is that that you can trust someone if they do what they say they're going to do. That's like such a basic measure of trust. Because when people say one thing and do something totally different, they're just confusing the situation. And how do you trust anything that they say? How do you approach those types of leaders that give mixed messages?
So that's actually a really, really good point. One of the ways that we do that is with the commitment pillar. And I'm gonna maybe flip it a little bit and just give you an example, because
Sure.
you've probably seen this too. So you've got a leadership meeting and everybody's assembled around the table, and one person comes running in the room 5 minutes late. And guess what? The next meeting, they do the exact same thing. And they're like, I'm sorry I'm late. And they come in and it's repeated. Well, that lack of commitment is now showing up in tardiness.
Mm-hmm.
And what tends to happen is that lack of commitment in showing up on time really shows a lack of commitment to the team, to the organization, and it will eventually show up in their business results. So one of the things that I really like about this framework is you can address issues like that in a way by tying it to these pillars. So let's say we had a team that had this problem. I would ask the question, how do we show commitment to this team? How do we demonstrate consistency in this team? And let them bring those things up. And naturally what happens is those things kind of come up. And so instead of it being a finger pointing of Maggie's late, it's we show commitment to each other by showing up on time. And so whether you address it with a leader specifically or a team, you can go through this framework and ask questions back to them to really have them reflect on how well are they demonstrating competency? How well are they showing commitment to the team? Are they being consistent? So maybe they're coming in late one time or coming in on time at some points, but then being late another time. Or think about how they approach problems. Maybe they're completely inconsistent in how they approach decisions. So that could also show up and appear in a lack of trust as well.
So when you take on a new customer, how do you approach implementing the framework?
Okay, that's a really good question. So I actually have a diagnostic tool that I can use. So we have a self-assessment, and then there's also a team assessment. The self-assessment asks each respondent, how well do I do these things? And it's a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being never, 10 being all the time. And it may ask things like, how often do I admit my mistakes? How often do I show care and compassion for those around me? How often do I, it may flip it around a little bit, how often do we make decisions collaboratively? So it's going to ask these questions. And then the team assessment is asking those same questions, but asking how well do we do that? And so what I find really interesting, Julio, every time I've done this, when I tabulate the individual results and the team results, the individual results are always higher than the team. So the problem's always somebody else, not me. And so it always brings a little bit of a humorous lens to this to get people to kind of look around the room and think, okay, I rated myself higher than I rated the team, but why? And then we go through those pillars and the questions behind those pillars and use that to prompt the conversation. So it's typically like a half-day workshop, or it could be a full day, just depending on how much opportunity there is. And so we go through that and then help them build an action plan at the end of the day so they can address maybe the 1 or 2 pillars that present the most opportunity.
And do you see any, I'm sure you see plenty, but do you see any specific patterns in size of business, in industries? What do you tend to see?
So the pattern that I tend to see is clarity is almost always the lowest ranked pillar, regardless of the size of company. And it's one of those things where it's easy to assume, presume, think you're being clear. And when we start to unpack it, we're really not. So I'll give you a really simple example. If I asked you and I said, Julio, I need your help. I need this presentation, blah, 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 by Monday. And you say, got it. Well, I may not have given you some of the details around who's the target audience or how many slides, or, okay, when I say Monday, is that 8 a.m.? Is that noon? Is that before I come in on Tuesday? And so oftentimes what happens is we end up with this mismatch. So let's say you work really hard on this presentation, you send it over to me and I look at it and I'm like, didn't hit the mark. Well, now I'm kind of thinking you maybe didn't deliver what I expected, but it really was on me to clarify those expectations. And so there's a really simple framework that I teach when we talk about clarity. And it's called ODC. 1 is the outcome defined clearly? So I need a presentation. It needs to be 5 slides. It's going to go to the blah, blah, blah person. and here's the point of the presentation. Is the deadline clear? So not just by Monday, is it Monday at noon? Okay. And then the C is for clarifying questions asked. Then I need to go back to you and say, Julio, what questions do you have? What have I not answered, to give you a chance to say, well, Maggie, you didn't tell me if I needed to use this template or that template or some other question that you would, clarifying question that you have. Oftentimes we just kind of do the dump the task and run and don't allow for that dialogue. So that's one really simple tool that I use when we talk about clarity. Another one is we do something called a 90-day quick plan, which gives them a framework to build how they're going to accomplish a 90-day plan. I won't go through all the details right now, but I'll tell you what the big nugget of it is we keep asking how, until we get to some very, very concrete steps. So if we say we want to increase market share, okay, how? Well, we're going to launch a new product. How? Well, we're going to make a change to this particular product in this way, and so on and so forth. And so oftentimes teams tend to stop at those higher levels,
Right,
and not go deep enough to all the hows. And so we keep saying, ask how, at least 3 times, and use that to build your plan.
Yeah, the articles that I've written on trust recently have all been around clarity.
There you go.
Specifically because we as humans tend to blame our staff that they must not be smart enough, they must not be competent enough, they must not understand us enough. But have we been clear enough?
Right, 100%.
And that's a huge issue that many leaders don't get at all. So I wrote down ODC because it's something that I think is very helpful. And yesterday I had a conversation around AI, and as you're talking about the clarifying questions, that conversation came up because you put garbage into ChatGPT and you're going to get garbage. So those clarifying questions are so significant and critical when you're trying to utilize something like ChatGPT for anything of value, because if you don't give it enough information, it's not going to give you what you want.
You are 100% right. Yeah, and that's the trick to using it. I mean, we would never go into Google and just say, 2 words. You say, I'm looking for blah 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 near me or whatever. We've learned to clarify in Google, clarify in AI, but you're 100% right. That determines the quality of the output that we get. And so it's the same with our teams. If we're not clear with the input, we're not going to be clear with the output.
Absolutely. What are some of the other critical pillars that you tend to see people getting stuck on?
So I'll tell you another one that tends to kind of trip up teams, and it's a pillar around connection. So people trust those who are willing to connect and collaborate. And I've seen this in my corporate life where they say work is work, personal is personal. And it's not about getting into all the personal details, but it's about finding some way to connect with people.
Yeah.
And when I do the workshop with teams, one of the exercises that I do is something called a trust shield. And it's literally like a coat of arms on a piece of paper. And it's divided up into these sections. And it includes things like my background, my values, my strengths, my opportunities. What do I want my life legacy to be? What is my mission in life? And so the way we do this exercise is you give everybody a few minutes to fill it out. Some people like to even get colors and, maybe use markers or, make it colorful. Some people just use words. So fill it out with whatever you want to share. And then what we do is I get people to stand up and go pair up with somebody. And I typically ask them, go find somebody maybe you don't know as well and share something off your shield. Julio, I've done this now so many different times. And what immediately happens, the room just buzzes. And it's hard for me to separate them and say, okay, it's time to switch, go find another partner and go share something off your shield. And the other thing that happens is they find things they have in common that maybe they didn't know. They learn something new about somebody, even if they've worked with each other for years.
Yeah.
And it gives them a point of connection that they otherwise would never have found with the standard water cooler hallway chit chat or what you talk about in meetings. And what I've seen happen is people then become friends and have that level of connection. You can't replace it. And I'll tell you, I recently did this exercise at a networking event. So it wasn't even like an intact team that worked together. I talked about the trust pillars, and then I facilitated the Trust Shield exercise at a networking event. It was a group of about 30 people, and it was on Zoom, in fact. And so we paired them up, and we gave them 5 minutes, and we came back to the main room. Julio, there was somebody that was crying. I didn't mean to make her cry, but what ended up happening was these two people ended up talking about their fathers who had both recently passed away. And so all of a sudden, they've now got this connection about their dads. And they're never going to forget that. And so once you build those foundational relationships, then you can get to business. And I think a lot of times leaders look at that as, okay, that stays outside of work. That doesn't belong here. Let's just get to business. And we forget that we're people. We need to connect as humans before you can get to the business side.
So Maggie, to kind of round out that connection conversation, how do you help your leaders find that fine line between enough and too much? Because that's something that I've seen a couple of times already, where it's like, yeah, it's a little too much sharing. So how do you help them, draw that distinction?
That's a good question. I think where I try to pull them back to is being transparent. So it may be pulling them back to a place about just being more transparent on work things as opposed to oversharing, because I've had that happen too, and it's kind of awkward.
Yeah.
Or just being a little bit more vulnerable, but pulling it back to just, okay, let's just be transparent. So it may be around just sharing rationale behind decisions, not necessarily everything you did last night.
So I'm sure that, as you work with your customers, they're just learning the pillars, right? So it's a practice situation. They've got to go through some exercise. So what are some of the common mistakes that you see leaders make as they're, trying to grow, but, inadvertently end up eroding trust?
Yeah. So I'll tell you, it ties back to the consistency pillar, and it's the little things that chip away at trust. So one of the things that I teach when I do these workshops is think about every interaction as either adding to or detracting from that bank account. There's really no neutral.
Yeah.
So something like I overpromised and underdelivered, or I said, I'll get back to you, and I didn't. Or I make a decision that seems counter to everything we've talked about, and there's zero transparency on why. Or even something like favoritism, or, just making some people moves without being clear on what's happening. Those are the little things that kind of chip away, and sometimes they're really hard to recover from. People remember those little things. So it may not be the really big things that stick out. It's the small, just the small things that erode. And so those are the things that I see that people are kind of quiet about, because nobody's going to come back and say, hey, you forgot to do this thing that you told me you were going to do. You promised me this, you didn't do this, you didn't explain why. They just quietly kind of just start to disengage.
But Maggie, I'm so busy, I don't have time to remember, all of these, little things that I'm supposed to be doing. You can't hold that against me.
Well, I tie back to what we talked about earlier. Trust hits the bottom line. And so yes, we're creating culture, but it's also accelerating results, reducing costs, and attracting and retaining talent. And one of the things that I ask leaders about is, are you attracting and retaining the right people? And if they say no, that's usually an indicator there's some trust thing going on. Or I'll give you another example, Julio. Even if they say sales are down, that can also be an indicator to go look at what's going on.
Oh, absolutely.
if the results are down, if sales are down, all of those things ladder up to trust. So, okay, if you don't have time for this, you don't have time to run your business.
And they need to understand it's an investment. This isn't just, something else that I need to do. You're investing in your business. You're investing in your people. You're investing in yourself.
Yep.
And they need to understand that. So
taking the time to do one of these workshops, to take a half day to really reflect, that's an investment as well. So they may say, I don't have time for that either. Well, you're going to get 10x or more ROI on that half day that you took out of your calendar to really invest in the team and in the business.
So Maggie, we touched on employee retention and acquisition, the trust, the challenges that trust brings to that. But what about client retention and acquisition? Trust in business, in every aspect of business, is critical. But how do you talk to leaders as on the client side?
Yep, that's a really, really good question. So clients don't always buy from the cheapest option. They buy from whom they trust the most. And so framing that in a way that, it's going to hit the bottom line at the end of the day. And so if your sales team does not come across as trustworthy in the client's eyes, and that goes back to these 8 pillars. Are they clear? Are they demonstrating competency? Are they consistent? Are they making connections with those clients? They may not make those sales. And so it bleeds over into those client relationships. And typically those clients see what's happening with the team.
That comes across, as they interact with, the different individuals of the team, because there's inevitably going to be, that comment, oh, Maggie was supposed to have taken care of that. And that's just like, in your face.
Right. When there's broken commitments, if there's deadlines that slip, and exactly to your point, and I've seen that, where the customer will call one department and they say, oh, so-and-so is supposed to do that for you. Or I'll transfer you to so-and-so. And the customer says, well, I already did that and I didn't get an answer. It to your point, it kind of shows the cracks, shows everybody the dirty laundry. So for a leader who doesn't buy this, my answer to that is, again, your clients are going to see this. It's going to impact your sales. It's going to impact your bottom line.
Yeah. And I was going to take it all the way to that top leader. Do you run into a lot of leaders that just don't get it? That you're talking to them and explaining, the pillars and the challenges, and they just, leave me alone.
Yes, but I will say this, it's fewer and far between.
Okay.
Maybe it's because I'm a little more selective in whom I work with.
That always helps.
It does, but I will tell you, in my past life, I saw this, and not to share that, but I've seen it where when whoever's at the top is not aligned, it permeates all the way down, and then that person asks, what's wrong with the team? And they don't realize it's a reflection of themselves. Because what that does is it creates silos in the organization. It creates division. It creates lobbing things over the wall. Again, broken commitments or missed deadlines. And so those are all the symptoms that we see that point back to lack of trust in the organization. And it typically goes all the way up to the top. And I've also seen the opposite of that. When that person at the top is, really walks the walk and talks the talk, that also cascades all the way down, because then people hold everybody else accountable.
You've touched a couple of times on culture. Do you get involved in, because that's typically more of an HR thing. So do you get involved in culture at all?
Only from this perspective.
Okay.
So I typically attack it from a trust angle. But one of the things, Julio, is I like to have a pretty broad network in my pool. And so I do have a business partner or collaborator that I work with. She's all about culture. And so if somebody needs a deep dive in that area, then I will refer to a colleague. And I typically kind of stay in my lane, in my coaching lane. If somebody needs a whole bunch of financial, like really deep financial stuff, then I'll refer that out too. So I kind of tend to stay in my lane. I'm really passionate about the area of trust as it ties to business results. So that's why it's in my wheelhouse. But I've got many others around me that I can, if somebody's really got like a deep-seated culture problem, then I'll ask my friend Karen to step in.
Yeah, and in our business, there is so much overlap that takes place. You'll have a sales and marketing coach talking about business strategy, where I also talk about business strategy, and you're talking about business strategy.
Yes.
And it really does, take a village to really help that organization and those leaders excel. So there's so much opportunity and need to bring in a solid team. And like you're saying, you get to focus on your lane, I get to focus on mine. And I know I've mentioned this to you before, but I heard you in that meeting where we met for the first time, that you used the racing car analogy.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and I share that so much. You want to tell our listeners about that?
Yeah. So if we think about a race car, Julio, for example, is going to work on the car itself. I'm going to work on the driver and maybe who else is in the car and where are they sitting in the car. And so in that regard, Julio and I could make great partners going into work with an organization and really give them kind of a full-fledged view. So yes, that's a great example. And thank you for reminding me of that analogy. I had forgotten about that. But that's a great way of telling our listeners that when you think about bringing on coaches to work with your team, one size may not fit all. And there may be multiple people that are needed to kind of create that complete picture.
And I share that need very often, and I tell them, I'm focused on operations. Yes, I can help you on the finance side if you're the right size company.
Right.
If you're a 50 million company, you need a fractional CFO to come in. But I'm a small, solopreneur making, $2-3 million. Yeah, I can help you on the marketing side. I can help you on the finance side. But when it gets beyond that, there's a threshold, and it's critical for everyone involved to bring in the specialists,
right?
Because we all have our own experiences, our own strengths, and that is when you can truly transform, your leadership and the organization. And there's too many missed opportunities by trying to, I'll say, be a little too cost conscious, perhaps. But again, it's an investment in you and your business.
100%.
So Maggie, what is one thing that a leader can do now to help build trust with their team?
Okay. The easiest way to rebuild broken trust is to make a new commitment and then keep it.
What a
easy as that. It's super, super, super simple. So just make one commitment and keep it. And then rinse and repeat.
And what are your thoughts on sharing? Hey, we're trying something new. We've brought in, some specialists to help us. Do you recommend to your leaders to be that transparent?
100%. 100%. I was about to say that's transparency. That ties to connection and clarity. It lets people know why was that person here? Why were you guys in a conference room for the afternoon, or why were you off site for the day? It's a demonstration of clarity.
And
so yes, absolutely.
Vulnerability too.
100%.
Yeah. So, the leader is human, and wow, they thought enough of us and the organization to bring in somebody to help.
Yeah. And I'll even add, maybe it's not as far as admitting a mistake, but admitting mistakes is also a way to rebuild trust. And so maybe bringing somebody in for a workshop is not saying, hey, we did something wrong in the past. It's, hey, we're looking to improve. We brought somebody in.
Maggie, no one leaves the show without providing couple of actionable tips that our listeners can implement today to improve their business. So what do you have for our listeners?
Yeah, so I would go back to make one commitment and keep it. Number two is keep asking how. So when you think about clarity, we talked about this earlier in the show, keep asking how until you're 100% clear. And then number three, just realize that you're either building trust or breaking it. There's no middle ground. Every action you take is either building or breaking. So take a moment to think about that.
Yeah, great. Those are great tips, and I hope our listeners take those to heart. Maggie, thank you for breaking down the real power of trust for us today. It's clear that trust isn't just a soft skill. It's a hard driver of results, growth, and culture. For our listeners, think about where trust shows up or doesn't in your business. What's one step you can take today to close that gap? As always, thank you for tuning in to From Stuck to Scaled. Be sure to subscribe and share it with another business leader and leave us a review. Until next time, keep building, keep growing, and keep scaling with trust at the center.
You've been listening to From Stuck to Scaled, growth strategies for small and mid-sized businesses, produced by Optocution LLC. For more information, tools, and resources, check out our website www.redefinepossible.co/podcast.